New Capenna spoiler season is in full effect. We've got multiple board wipes, we've got crazy resource generators, and we even have a sword that turns planeswalkers into creatures.
Magic.
I am a wizard!
History.
I'm an old wizard!
The Magic Historian.
My bones hurt. Greetings! Owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends! I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for more Streets of Capenna spoiler goodness. And the stuff we're going to look at today is absolutely insane. So let's not waste any time. Let's take a look at the cards. So we're starting out with a very strange board wipe in the form of Hostile Takeover. This is 1 red, 1 black, and 1 blue and 2 for a sorcery that says up to 1 target creature has base power and toughness 1/1 until end of turn. Up to 1 other target creature has base power and toughness 4/4 until end of turn. Then Hostile Takeover deals 3 damage to each creature. So clearly this is capable of taking a lot of creatures off the board and specifically allowing you to single out one of your opponent's creatures that is going to get taken down by the effect by turning it into a 1/1 and picking one of your creatures that you want to guarantee survives this situation, right? So it does have some versatility in terms of being a board wipe, and it isn't an absolute board wipe because it doesn't destroy every creature in play, it just does a set amount of damage. The concept behind the card is clearly supposed to be Ob Nixilis preparing to take over New Capenna. Now, admittedly, trying to connect the abilities of the card to the actual story is pretty difficult because it does feel like Ob Nixilis mainly just hung out in the background, kind of leeching off low-level employees from the crime families, and he really only shows up at the end of the story to confront Xander. So ultimately, in terms of the mechanics of the card, it doesn't tie that well in story-wise, but in terms of being a genuinely interesting card, this is some interesting design, right? Shrinking down a dude, making one larger, and then blasting everybody with damage feels weird for a blue-black-red combination. The damage across the board makes sense for red. Shrinking a creature down to 1/1 kind of makes sense for blue. Making a creature 4/4 for red is where it feels a little bit odd for me, although they have actually given some giant growth style effects to red in recent times. So I suppose there is some room in the flavor for that as well. And even if it is slightly outside of the flavor, it does give the feeling of a crazy maneuvering setup trying to get yourself into a position of power, right? So it works from that regard. It's not the only board wipe we're going to talk about, but next we're going to talk about Obscura Interceptor. This is 1 black, 1 blue, 1 white, and 1 for a 3/1 Cephalid wizard, and you'll notice that cephalids look quite different in this set, right? Cephalids before had a distinctly different appearance from this. This one has flash, lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, it connives. When it connives this way, return up to 1 target spell to its owner's hand. So it is almost a pseudo counterspell, right? You're only stopping the spell for a brief moment, but depending on the timing of it, that can be really powerful. The fact that this creature has flash and lifelink on top of being able to connive and stop one of your opponent's spells is pretty wild. If it's not obvious to you, the spell has to be on the stack when you target it. So you can't target spells that have resolved and come into play. You couldn't pick one of your opponent's creatures and say, I'm bouncing that. You have to play the Interceptor at the exact moment the spell is cast. And it's cool from a flavor perspective because the Obscura are the ones who can see into the future, right? So basically they're able to see into the future that you're about to cast this spell. They have one of their wizards appear instantaneously and essentially trap your spell in this crazy flowing glass sphere. Look at that screaming face. Let me out of the globe. It's a pretty wild concept, and honestly, this feels like a very powerful card. Of course, the fact that you have to be able to play 3 different colors to cast it does limit its power somewhat, but honestly, this is very, very strong to me. Now let's talk about a strange card. The Black Market Tycoon. This one is risky, which fits quite well into the flavor of a black market, right? So, 1 green and 1 red get you a 2/2 cat rogue in a business suit, which is fun. At the beginning of your upkeep, Black Market Tycoon deals 2 damage to you for each treasure you control. Tap them to create a treasure token. The flavor text says, I have exactly what you need. The question is, how badly do you need it? And this is awesome flavor on top of being a genuinely interesting design, right? We don't have a lot of cards that can just produce artifacts that you can sack for mana on this regular of a basis. All you have to do is be able to tap this guy, right? And technically, you can do some really nutty combos with this guy. If you used Freed from the Real on him, it's 1 blue to untap the creature that's enchanting, right? So you could literally tap this guy, make a treasure token, sack it for a blue mana, untap the guy. So with those 2 cards alone, you could go, I can now generate infinite treasure tokens. So if you have anything else that cares about you putting an artifact or whatever out, you're gonna be laughing, right? And that's just off the top of my head. There's tons of ways to take advantage of it. But I like the fact that because he's a black market tycoon, he's got to be aware of, basically other gangs trying to take him down or other problems that come as a result of being part of the black market. So if you have treasure at the wrong time, you end up getting damaged, you pay the price, right? So it's a cool sort of making a dark deal. Can you benefit more from it? And the artwork is great, right? You've got the cat here standing in his office with the awesome stained glass window in the back, and it looks like there's actually a fox face in that stained glass, or maybe it's supposed to be a cat's face. But either way, it looks really cool as he's gesturing to these bottles of Halo in his well-appointed office. Looking great. Now let's go down into the streets with the Shakedown Heavy. 1 black and 2 for a 6/4 menace. Whenever Shakedown Heavy attacks, defending player may have you draw a card. If they do, untap Shakedown Heavy and remove it from combat. So this is pretty nutty. You can use it as a defender, your opponent can't do anything about it. It's got menace, so they have to double block it. And with that 6/4 Crawworm style body, he's going to be doing a ton of damage. So there's probably going to be a fair bit of time where your opponent's just like, you know what? Untap him and draw a card. Forget it, whatever. It's really, really cool, this concept of him being removed from combat in exchange for treasure, right? The flavor text says, look, we both get what we want. I get your Halo, you get to keep your kneecaps. So the Halo represents the card that he's getting for you. It's amazing to get such a big body for such a low cost, but ultimately, it will be very hard to connect with him. So it remains to be seen how much of an impact that this character can really have overall on standard, right? I mean, it cuts 2 ways. The card draw doesn't help you if you can't connect with your opponent at all, but the amount of resources you're getting could clearly put you ahead as well, right? So moving on, we've got another piece of board wipe. This one is Depopulate. It's only 2 white and 2, which is pretty much as cheap as it gets when it comes to sorceries that wipe every creature off the board. If you go any cheaper, they're going to put conditions on it. You won't get to nail all the creatures. But Depopulate literally does what it says. Depopulates the board. Each player who controls a multicolored creature draws a card, then destroy all creatures. So kind of representing if you have a family affiliation, you can avoid some of the fallout or at least get some kind of reward from it, versus if you don't have a family affiliation, then you're just hosed. That's the flavor behind it. The artwork is absolutely terrifying as the heavens just open up and wipe out all life in the city. Like, how does the city repopulate? Do people come in from outside the city? Is this like what happened? No, that isn't what happened to the angels, because that gets covered in the story. Actually, speaking of which, if you're curious about the story of New Capenna, I've got a 5 video series on the entire story over on Fantasy Geographic, and we've just dived into covering the side stories too. So the story about Perry and the brokers and Falco and all that just came out yesterday. I'll leave that up on the screen at the end of the video, and we're actually going to talk about a card that really ties into the story heavily at the end of the video. But let's move on to the next card, which is Cemetery Tampering, which is actually my favorite hideaway card of all times. This is 1 black and 2 for a Hideaway 5 card. If you're not familiar with Hideaway, how it works is when this card enters the battlefield, you're going to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you're going to pick one of them and exile it, and the rest of the cards go on the bottom of your deck in a random order. Now, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may mill 3 cards. Then, if there are 20 or more cards in your graveyard, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So obviously, just keep feeding your graveyard full of stuff, and eventually you get the big payoff. Now, I love the artwork here with somebody who's been thrown down into this massive grave, and you have a crew of diggers who are just piling dirt on top of them. The idea of being buried alive is terrifying, right? But this takes the concept of Hideaway to a whole new level. This is the best example of literally showing what you're hiding away in a piece of Hideaway art. The original Hideaway stuff we got were like lands, and none of them really felt like, okay, where are the things being hidden away? Are they supposed to be tucked away somewhere on this island? Whereas with this, where's the hideaway? We literally threw him in a hole and are covering up with mud. And then when we get enough stuff in the graveyard, he pops back up and he's like, surprise! I guess the only confusing part about it from the artwork's perspective is seeing the guy who's going to get to come back when you hit the right level, reaching up like, hey, no, I don't volunteer for this job, I guess. You know what I mean? It's got like, the artwork has more of a menacing vibe to it, but that's not actually what's going on. So, I don't know. Either way, perfect example of a hideaway concept. Let us move on and talk about Toulouse, the clever conductor. Every time I would play this card, I would go, are you ready to lose? That's what I'll do. So, it's a hybrid blue and black, a blue, and a hybrid blue and white to cast it. So you could actually just cast this with 3 blue if you wanted to play straight blue with it, right? Now, it's a human rogue that is 3/1. It has, when it enters the battlefield, it connives, so you draw a card and discard a card. If it's an on-land card, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile them from your graveyard. So the card you connive with Toulouse will get exiled, and when Toulouse dies, put the cards exiled with it into their owner's hand. So, you know what this actually reminds me of? Bag of Holding. I really like that Bag of Holding piece of artifact gear where every time you pitch a card, it gets put off into the Bag of Holding. It's like, here you go. And when you sack the Bag of Holding for 4 mana, you get all the cards into your hand. But the problem is, Bag of Holding is way too slow. I keep trying to use it, and it keeps failing me. It's just not up to the task. But this right here, a creature that just says, yo, whenever you discard a card, put it to the side, but you're not going to have to do anything special to get the cards back. All you have to do is let Toulouse die. And because Toulouse is a legendary creature, you can literally use multiple copies. You don't even have to try and bait your opponent into destroying it, right? You don't have to try and swing with it or hold it back as a blocker, because if you play a second copy of this creature, the legendary rule kicks in. And then you just go, I guess I'll sacrifice the first one I put out. Boom, hits the graveyard, and you're getting all of your cards back, right? So, this is a really solid little package. At first, when you look at it, you may go, okay, whatever. I just get to draw a card and discard a card. But really, it feels like it's going to fit into a value package and give you a ton of cards. The fact that it will refill your hand with stuff for no cost, just having the creature go, you know what I mean? Toulouse doesn't even have to be exiled when Toulouse goes to the graveyard. So you have a situation where you can just keep recurring and create these crazy, massive resource setups for yourself. Now, I said we were going to talk about an important card for the story, and here it is. Luxior Giada's Gift. I left this for the end because we actually talked about it in last night's live stream, and since it was spoiled yesterday, it's not as fresh as the other cards. And I know you guys want the freshest of lobsters when it comes to your spoilers. So, Luxior Giada's Gift is a 1 casting cost legendary artifact equipment with amazing abilities. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each counter on it. Great for anybody who's playing a counter-based deck. However, where it really gets crazy is with the following abilities. Equipped permanent isn't a planeswalker and is a creature in addition to its other types. And it's got equip planeswalker for 1, and it equips regularly for 3. And you'll note it specifically says planeswalker's loyalty abilities can still be activated. So this is wild. Basically, for 1 mana, you can equip it onto a planeswalker you already have out. As soon as you do that, it is no longer a planeswalker. It's now a creature with power and toughness equal to the number of loyalty counters that are placed on that planeswalker. So if it was a 5 loyalty planeswalker, boom, now you've got a 5/5 creature. It's important to note as well that because the planeswalker isn't a planeswalker anymore and is now a creature, the damage rules for planeswalkers do not apply. So if a creature that is equipped with Giada's Gift, like a planeswalker is equipped with Giada's Gift, takes damage, it does not lose loyalty counters, but you can still use its loyalty abilities only once per turn and only 1 ability, but still, that is really crazy. And in terms of the flavor, this is the magical Halo-infused sword that Elspeth receives as, obviously, a gift from Giada. But another gift she receives is discovering her own angelic heritage. And my belief is that this Halo sword is going to be essentially an infinite supply of Halo because Elspeth can feed her angelic essence directly into the blade. And this blade is what's supposed to destroy New Phyrexia. This blade will be key in casting down Elish Norn. So this is a very important card. In fact, you'll note it has Story Spotlight down there on the bottom. So it is super important. Now that wraps up all the spoilers, so if you're not a patron of my channel, it is time for you to leave. But patrons, stick around, cause we're going for a cruise. You guys are the best people on the planet, so I'm taking you for a little drive down the street. Beep, beep, beep. Thanks for supporting my channel. You guys are the best and guaranteed only the best things in life. I will see you all next time.